All right, guys, this is episode 38, I think. It's like our third or fourth with just exclusive Empire guys and not Greeley guys only anymore. This is Grant Cuomo. All of you guys should know Grant, but just a quick rundown on some of his credentials. He's a three-time section champ, two-time All-State Grant.
Three-time All-State.
Race your sophomore year? I can't remember. My brain is
Yeah.
two-time finalist and state champ his senior year. Was great. Like went to Ironman.
Three-time All-State.
Yeah, went to Ironman his senior year. Plays got injured there, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Went to college. He's at Princeton, Ivy League. Obviously, a very smart guy. Qualified for NCAA's this year, and again, we'll get into that later as well with the whole COVID situation, how he handled all of that. But him and J.M. Camacho, we interviewed last, are the two club guys that actually were the guys that made it into this tournament. So I feel like that's a little interesting wrinkle. Been wrestling his whole life. Dad's a great guy. Family's great. Grant, and if you've been watching any of these, Grant, how we always started them, same exact way, is how'd you start wrestling? So I want to hear this story. How'd you get into it?
Yeah. So I started at a very young age, back when I was in kindergarten. And my dad's the one who got me into it. But sort of the reason that he got me into it was because he was a wrestler back in his day. He wrestled through high school. Was pretty average. I think he won divisionals, and that was sort of like his claim to fame for wrestling. Actually wound up wrestling 2 years at Binghamton, and then he transferred to Cornell and finished his academic prowess there. But at home, I think he was like out in public somewhere, and he saw someone wearing like a Brewster Youth Wrestling Club shirt, and he asked him, he's like, "Hey, like, you guys, there's a wrestling club in Brewster?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, like we have practices, twice a week at this time, whatever, blah, blah, blah." And like to my dad, it all came back to him, because he hadn't even thought about wrestling for 20 years. And now he has a son who's growing up, kindergarten, first grade, and he finds out that the town that he lives in has a wrestling club. And just from that, he took me to the next practice. I loved it. He loved it. And then it just went on from there. I feel like I had a fairly successful youth career. I watched Jacob's interview, and he was talking about how he like sucked when he was growing up. But I was always like fairly successful in the youth stages, and I think that success is what really carried me through my career and really just like motivated me to continue getting better.
Coach, you might find this interesting. This is just a little caveat that I'm going to add into what Grant was saying. Now, Grant's similar to Grippy, where I didn't have Grant like I had PJ since kindergarten and first grade or whatever. I had PJ the whole time. Grant I met when he was a little later. He was a little bit more into his career. It was probably 6th or 7th grade, something like that. He was doing Askren, doing Empire, doing both a little bit. But the one thing I remember at a young age with Grant, with his dynamic with his dad, is his dad was maybe different than a Mr. Grippy, where he was more involved. And not that Mr. Grippy wasn't involved. He would go to tournaments and stuff like that. But Grant's dad would talk to John. He would watch practice. He would do all these things. But the one thing that I noticed is, although his dad wanted Grant to always be his best and push his hardest, you could always, regardless of what was going on, tell that there was a lot of love between both of them and there wasn't resentment, right? Mm-hmm. So even though, it's something that I want Grant to maybe touch on, but it's like, it wasn't that crazy typical wrestling dad that maybe is a little bit over the line, but it isn't that laid back wrestling dad that wasn't, in it as much either. He was like a medium guy, but like you would see him hug and give Grant a kiss after his matches. Grant would be reciprocal of that and happy and smiling. And they had a good relationship, but he was involved more than maybe the normal laid back dad, right? You want to maybe touch on that a little, Grant? Because it's a little interesting, like wrinkle, I feel like.
Absolutely. And this is something that I've actually talked with John a fair bit as well. So it's not really just me and my dad. It's my entire family. We're a very affectionate family. We have no problem showing our affection for each other.
Yeah. It's normal, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that really, it's hard being a wrestling dad, and it's hard being a young kid who has a dad who's very serious about wrestling. A lot of kids, their dads take it too seriously and they burn out. They run out of steam. But I feel, and my dad was hard on me when it came to wrestling. There's no doubt about it. But it's almost as if that sort of like tough love, he would, I'd get yelled at after practice, right? But then but then, he'd give me a hug and it would be all right. And it was almost that tough love that sort of like maintained our relationship. Um, if he was only tough on me and he didn't show any love, I don't know where I'd be today. But the fact that he, showed me affection and, knew when to back off and to, if I had just lost a really hard match, he wasn't gonna start tearing into me. That was the time for a hug. That wasn't the time for yelling, and I think that he knew those boundaries. And I think that really brought our relationship together. And to this day, I have no problem, hugging my dad in public or anything like that. We
No,
still maintain that.
you shouldn't. And D, I'll tell you, like I've dealt with, and so have you, Coach DeBellis, but I've dealt with a lot of wrestling parents now in my time coaching. And Coach, you got probably about 10 years of coaching on me. You probably been coaching about 20. I've been coaching about 10. And but with the club, I've dealt with a lot of different parents in that realm as well. Different people. And something I really, every time I met his mom and his sisters, by the way, great, sweet, nice people. I didn't see them as much because Mr. Cuomo was driving Grant to practice or being at practice. So I had a lot more interactions with him. And even though he was hard on Grant, I never felt like, and there are dads that I was kind of like, oh my God, like, what are you doing? Like, I never felt like that. I thought it was silly sometimes when him and John would argue about things. I'm like, what is happening right now? But like, it never was I never thought like he needs to let off the gas on Grant. Like that thought never kind of came into my mind. I felt like it was a happy medium. And I feel like, Jake, I'm going to kick your butt. Oh, you saw I did that without even pausing, Jake. But I feel like, you, Coach DeBellis, and hopefully me with our boys that will I think holding people accountable is an important thing. If Luca decides to wrestle or Jake actually decides to commit to wrestling and show up to practice, he doesn't need to win a national championship. We would like it, right? He doesn't need to, but you have a commitment, you hold the commitment. Jake, I'm going to beat you up. You keep up the commitment. D, what do you think about that? Because I feel like that's kind of your wheelhouse because you'll push Nikki a little bit, but, you do show love.
As a dad,
you play,
Yeah, as a dad, it's really tough. And Jake, get the hell out of here. See? I got 2 sons. Come on, Jake.
What is
Oh
happening?
my goodness.
I guess, it depends on the kid a little bit, but I've seen some dads in the youth and stuff like that are really tough on their kids, and the kids don't, they're like, well, I'm done with this. I'm done. But, a lot of the real successful kids, the parents are super committed as well, and they have to be. And that drive from the parent is filtered down to the kid. And I think Grant was like that. I think Grant is. He would sit.
And he's frozen.
Yeah.
Watch, and he would analyze, and he would his opinion. But he was never disrespectful to a ref. I've never seen him disrespectful to a ref. I've never seen him disrespectful to coaches. I think he was just the perfect amount. And as Grant was saying, so Grant is the testament to it. You have to be tough.
Yeah, well, I was going to add on to that
successful.
before we go any further. Like I said, I hope that I think that DeBellis and I will be the same. Nicky, his oldest son, is kind of getting into a grad now where he's like, 5th, 6th grade. He's starting to kind of really get serious. But I would say my father was very similar to Grant's dad, where he did push me, but he knew when not to push on the gas. He did show affection. It wasn't my wrestling matches wasn't equating my worth. You know what I mean? Like I was going as hard as I could, and he would maybe say, hey, you probably could have been in a better stanza match. What were you doing? Like, and I'd be like, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. And we would have our little arguments or whatever. But at the end of the day, I was his son regardless if I won a state title, regardless if I took 4th in the state, regardless if I was a section champ. It didn't affect that, right? I think the problem now with wrestling at the youth level is you'll see, fathers call their sons names, and it's like you see this chubby guy standing in the corner yelling stuff. It's like, dude, get your butt on the mat and you do it then. Like, and I think that's the problem where Grant's dad was a real guy and he knew what had to take place for Grant to be good. So he respected that. I think my dad knew how hard I worked. So it wasn't like, I don't want to lose, right? So he knew I didn't want to lose. He knew Grant's dad knew he didn't want to lose. It wasn't time to rub it in their face. And I think he had a really strong understanding of that. But to keep on that, Grant, so you were very successful as a youth wrestler. You and Grippy, weren't you guys going back and forth with like state titles and stuff? How was your youth career outside of the parenting aspect?
Yeah. I was a successful youth wrestler. I won most of my matches. Me and Matt definitely had a rivalry for most of our career up until high school when we finally separated in weight.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I actually only won one U state title, which I guess isn't that impressive. But I did a lot of traveling, and kudos to my dad for that. We went everywhere and anywhere. If there was a tournament, I was going to be there. Um, and I think that's part of where my success came from as a youth wrestler was because my dad was willing to put in the time, effort, and money, quite frankly, to take me around and to get me to practice and to drive me out to Virginia for a tournament. And he would register me in 2 weight classes or 2 divisions, and I would just grind as a youth wrestler. And it sucked back then, and it was hard, but it's what needed to happen.
No, it would suck that it was hard, but do you have any really fun memories from those trips? Because to me, when I was young, and I wasn't as serious as you, at a young age, I was serious from the 3rd grade on, but not to like you and Grippy level. But I remember going on trips out of state and stuff, and it was hard. The tournaments were hard. But I remember like the road trip of it. It was kind of fun. Like we would stop somewhere to eat on the way home. It was a whole like thing. Do you have like fond memories of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And almost all of them are with my dad. He was always the one,
Yeah,
with me for all of it.
same with me and
Um,
my dad.
yeah,
And
just
I'm sorry.
nights. Yeah. Just nights in the hotel, um, getting food after the tournament. We would always try and seek out the best spot to get food after a tournament, depending on where we were. It's even funny today. I'd be traveling around with my dad, and I don't know this stuff, but he knows it. He'd be like, "Oh yeah, we stayed at that hotel for whatever tournament 10 years ago." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh, all right."
Yeah, he probably doesn't forget any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Coach, can I bring you in on this, Coach? Because you actually said what Grant
Yeah.
said to me just now, said to us just now, is that, fortunately his father was able to be as committed as he was, saying, I'll take you to these tournaments and we'll do this. And me and you have talked about that a sport like wrestling, it's possible, but it's very hard to be super successful without the full commitment from not only you, but your family. Um, we've talked about that, D, but what do you think about that whole dynamic there?
Well, like I said earlier, it's a family commitment, and I'm sure that Grant also brought other kids along with him. Maybe Grippy was there. I remember Brewster during the times of when Grant was there. Brewster was a powerhouse. The youth program at Brewster was really second to none in the area at the time. I think Jack Duncan was running the youth program, and he did a terrific job. And and I think Yorktown's doing that now, where they have 75 kids in their youth, and it's everybody's got to come together, and they got to carpool, and they got to go have fun. I remember taking trips to Binghamton and taking trips to Long Island with all of like Brock and Jacob and Nathan and Schreiber and all those guys. So, but it is a lot of fun to go out on those trips.
Of course, and we'll get into a little bit too with Grant's connection to other wrestlers, because he affected, in the club, when he got older in the club, he affected all of the wrestlers, because like Jacob was talking about, and we'll talk about that later, Grant helped a lot of the kids. But even a guy like Aaron Walk, who we'll talk about later in the interview when we get to more high school stuff, I
always looked up to Grant.
Always looked up to Grant.
Not about it.
And I think at the time when they wrestled in that section finals match, I think Grant wins 99 out of 100 just on skill level at the time. But I think there was no chance for Aaron to win that match because how much he looked up to Grant anyways. Like there was that dynamic because Grant helped him. Grant wrestled similar to him.
Loved about Grant in that finals.
What's that, Coach?
The thing I loved about Grant in that final, he wasn't wrestling his protege.
You shouldn't have been.
He was wrestling another guy, and he was going to pound him. And that's what I was like, oh, my God. Grant was a senior, I think, and Aaron was a sophomore.
Junior.
No.
Sophomore.
Junior and sophomore.
Grant, like there's so many stories. So I've never, if you watched, I know you said you watched Jacobs. I don't write notes or anything. I don't do anything. I just go off the top of my head. So I'm going to try, my relationship with Grant is maybe a little deeper than even Camacho's, and I love Camacho to death, but I probably knew Grant a little bit before I knew Camacho, but similar era, but a little bit before. So there's so many like stories and things that it's kind of hard. So if you remember something and you want to bring it up, go right ahead and bring it up. But as we move forward, let's get to middle school and talk about how kind of wrestling changed for you from when you were a youth wrestler to now you're a middle school wrestler. Like what was the shift there?
Right. So when I was in middle school, I was brought up to varsity in 7th grade.
Mhm.
So I never really wrestled modified in middle school. I was still in youth wrestling in 6th grade, but 7th grade I was brought up to varsity. And for me, that was just like, it was just such a crazy experience to, cause at the time, Brewster was actually a decent team still.
Oh,
Um,
really?
and yeah, so it was just like, so there was still, we had like that competitive environment going um in the room at practices. And I felt like I was like thrown into something I wasn't really ready for, not for the wrestling side of things, but more from like the fact that I'm a 7th grader hanging out with sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school. Um but I also feel like at the same time, it was a good thing that happened, because I felt like I really just matured a lot quicker than most middle schoolers would, because they're in middle school.
Yeah.
um, yeah, but that was like, and also just that time, I think it really proved to me that I actually do have a future in this sport. Because I remember my dad talking to me, um, when I found out I was going to get pulled up. He was like, listen, like, this isn't youth wrestling. It's going to be really hard. You're going to lose a bunch of matches. You're going to get your ass beat. And I was like, all right, like, let's do it, And I think my record, in 7th grade, I was 99 pounds. My record was 33-11. So that's actually not that bad. And it was
Did
at
you
that
play
point.
sections?
No, I did not. What wound up happening? I definitely made it to sectionals. I don't remember how my sectionals went. Um, I think I might have placed, might not have placed, not really sure. But it was just sort of like, I was like, okay, like, I'm in 7th grade, and I'm like, I'm taking it to these, sophomores and juniors in high school. Like, I might actually be okay at this sport. Um, and then it just progressed from there. I just got better and better. 8th grade, lost to, or no, what? No, 8th grade. Actually, I did worse in 8th grade than I did in 7th grade, because I went from 99 to like 126. So I actually was like up with the
Yeah,
bigger guys
big
now.
jump.
And that's when I started to really know Grant around
That's a
that
big.
era. Like,
Yeah. Um, but then I went, and then freshman year, I lost to Brady in the finals. I remember that one.
I remember that too. But didn't you beat Connor in the semis?
I did.
And
I
that was a
did.
big match. It
Yeah,
wasn't
it
Connor
was.
returning something or other at that time, maybe section finalist or
It
something.
was, yeah, it was definitely a highly anticipated matchup
Yeah, I
there.
remember that. But we could go there's so many stories and things we could talk about, and I want to get into with Grant being a little bit older. But right off the bat, maybe Grant, talk about just the idea maybe of even 7th, 8th, 9th grade club wrestling, because we could talk about it a little bit later in your career too. But how did that kind of how'd that work? Were you going to high school practice, then driving straight to club practice, and how was the atmosphere there compared to the high school? Like, you could speak on the club wrestling stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I didn't miss any club practices, like, not really ever. If I did, I was getting a nasty text from John. So yeah, I would finish high school, pretty much get home, get my stuff together, and go to club practice. But the reality is, club practice is really where the magic happens. Um, Wrestling at Empire was hands down. I mean, that's the reason where I'm at, where I am, where I'm at today. It was that development that I had in the club, that just elevates you as a wrestler. You can be, I mean, you could be the hardest worker in the world, and that will get you pretty far. But in terms of wrestling, if you don't have a partner, if you don't have someone else who is going to push you, it doesn't do you any good to just beat the crap out of guys. You need someone who's going to challenge you.
Yeah.
And that's why I loved wrestling Anthony.
Well, I was going to get more into that the later we go too, but we'll bring it up now. And I'll say it to D, and I think I've said this to Coach Spells before. Even before Grant became who Grant ended up being, right? State champ, really good. Now a good D1 wrestler is going to be an NCAA All-American, NCAA champ. He's that good. I think he's that good. Even when he was younger, but he was still good, but he was coming up. Wrestling Grant was probably the worst thing in the world, but the best at the same time, because I kind of like that a little bit. I like that grind. I like that feeling. But even when he was a 10th grader and I would get my hands on him, like, you would have to, and for lack of better like words or sayings, I would have to like shoot him to score. Like, and I would because I was a grown man and he was a kid at that time. But like, it was like he would never give anything up. It was never, and you see this happen with wrestlers, and the Jacobs and the Aaron are good examples. They ended up being really good. But there was a time in there where they looked at me as coach and they respected me too much and they let me run them over. Even when Grant had no business going hard with me, that never was a thing. Like, he always thought that he could stay. He always was confident. He always fought every position until there was no more fight left to do. Like, there was no more options left. He gave up all his options. He's in a bad position. He has to either belly down or whatever. Other than that, there was nothing. He would fight. And for the people that know Grant, they know Grant is a very nice guy. He's a nice guy. He's a smart guy, intelligent guy, obviously. But he's mean, right? And that's a good thing. But that's a really, really good thing in the sport like wrestling. Like, you know, people that know me well probably are like, oh, Anthony, the people outside of wrestling are probably, oh, Anthony's such a nice guy. But they really knew me. They might be a little mean. Like, why is he acting like that? Because that's like, to be good at this sport, you need that chip on your shoulder. There's no way you're going to be successful. Grant was mean. And I'll never forget, we were wrestling, we wrestled Brewster. I think it might have been like his 10th grade or 9th grade year. I'm saying in the early ages now before we get to like the really
cool. Man.
But there was this kid, Paul Seaham, who I like a lot, man. Paul is tough. But obviously he was not in the same stratosphere as Grant.
Nope.
And I think
maybe academically
he's very smart, yeah. But I feel like at that time, Grilly and Brewster, it was like a close duel meet. Like,
it was going to be a close one.
It was going to be a close duel meet. So I knew Paul was tough, but I knew I was throwing him to the Wolves when I was throwing him to Grant. I knew he had no chance to win the match. But my goal was to maybe get tagged or, you know, whatever, and hopefully not give up 6. That's our plan, right? And for Grant, it didn't matter if that was the guy's plan. He was normally going to get the 6 anyway. So kudos to Paul to even make it in a thing that he was almost getting, you know, it was a tag and it was all this stuff. But long story short, and Grant, correct me if I'm wrong, because like I said, my memory's a little shoddy lately. Third period, we are losing by 14 going into the third. I make Paul pick top to basically cut him, and we give up the tech just to end it, right? Like, trying to be like a little you know, be crafty coach in here. Like, let's not give Grant any more chances to get this fall. Let's go.
Oh, man.
We'll get whatever. So Paul goes to like cut. I think I might have even yelled, cut him.
I think you did. I think I did.
Yeah. So he goes to cut him. And now people that know wrestling, Grant's on all fours. Paul's behind him. Grant will not face him. And he's like reaching his arms like a prairie mantis trying to like capture him. And he's like, this went on for like 30 seconds. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, Paul, just get away, Paul. Just get away from him. But
I wouldn't let him.
What happened? How did it end? I don't remember how it ended.
All right. So what happened? Well, first of all, the ref was laughing at this point. All right. It was completely absurd. It had to be the most absurd thing anyone's ever seen in a wrestling match.
Yeah.
I wouldn't let him. I wouldn't face him, and I wouldn't let him turn around and get in front of me. I was just like, and it was if it was anyone else, I would have been like, all right, whatever, match over. But it was you, and I was like, there's no way I'm getting this pin. I was like, I can't let him get away. I think eventually what happened was like, I half turned around to try and get his leg, and the ref was just like one neutral. And I was like, all right, whatever. But it was absurd. I was literally on all fours, and he was trying to come around in front, and I was just keeping my butt to him the whole time for like, yeah, it had to be 30 seconds or more.
It was something like that. But when a moment like that, 30 seconds feels a lot longer than 30 seconds. You know, you feel like time always goes fast, but when you want the time to go quicker, it goes slower. It's one of those weird things. But that was funny. But that's his toughness. And another story, before I forget, because it's on the front of my mind right now, I think this was Grant's junior year. And we were at practice, we were at the club, and he did fine. I think John was mad at something, whether it was Grippy or Grant. I don't remember who he was mad at or what happened. So he made me take the other kids out of the room. That's when we were on the other side, and I went to the turf side with the other kids. And he's like, I'm going to break you, to Grant and Grippy. He told them both that he was going to break them. And so what he did was he put Matt on one side of the room, he put Grant on the other side of the room, and he put 2 people with Matt, and he put 2 people with Grant. And those guys were going to stay fresh, and they were going to work in on these 2 until the people in the middle, Grant and Grippy, broke. And I remember this like yesterday. So Grippy did it for a bit, you know, but Grippy, even though he had more in the tank probably, but he's like, I'm not doing this shit. So he broke, but I think he kind of just said, I'm over it, and he left. I go in, and I'm like, what's going on? Grant broke the people that were working in on him. he made the people that were fresh, that were working in on him, quit. And I remember, it's similar to what I said with Jacob. Like, there was moments when I kind of knew, and there was other moments in Grant's career when I knew he was going to be good too. But like that moment right there, I was like, Grant is tough. And I don't even care. Like, of course, I want him to be successful, but I'm like, I don't even care about what happens from here on out. I have utmost respect for Grant because he did that right then and there. And so when I looked at Grant differently from that moment on, I'm like, this kid's got that little something like going on in there that he does not want to give in to anybody, and I love it. Do you remember that workout, Grant?
I do. And I remember Matt quitting and not coming back to practice for like a month. He didn't come back to practice for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's one, I would say that's what, defines me as a wrestler is I won't quit. I won't do it.
No. And you see it in his college matches still if you watch some of those, Coach. What were you going to say, Coach? I saw you about to say something.
I was going to say that, a lot of you hear the word hammer thrown around a lot in wrestling. Oh, he's a hammer. He's a hammer. Grant is a hammer. Grant is a hammer.
Oh, yeah. Absolute hammer. And the problem
you
is.
know what I mean? Like you hear everybody say, oh, that guy's a hammer. Grant is a hammer.
Absolute hammer. And it's so hard because everything's like Jacob's story about when he broke out on the national scene to me stands out because of the circumstance. There's so many I remember more practice with these guys than matches itself. The one reason that Camacho's story stands out so much is because it was such a weird circumstance that the lights went out and all these things happened. How can you not forget them? But the more I think about it, and I'm trying to get these thoughts in my head as we speak, is like Pop and Flo, Grant beating people maybe that he wasn't supposed to be beating, and like, stepping up for the team at a young age. Like, he was just a competitor every way you cut it. Like, he was ready to go and he was ready to fight. And I actually remember, could have been his junior year or senior year. Probably his junior year because he wasn't injured yet. Or maybe the beginning of his senior year before he went to Ironman. But I was wrestling with him, probably his senior year actually, because he was scoring. But he's still like, now he would kick my butt. But the senior year I was still getting the better of him. But he would get takedowns, right? And he would make me so tired that normally I could take the annoyingness on the sidelines or whatever. But I was wrestling with him, and Mike Boyle and Khalid were there, and Grant got a takedown. And all I kept hearing was Khalid's silly stuff go, do it. I was so tired. Because it was like that, right? Just ridiculous and dramatic. And I was so tired because it was Grant, and Grant fights, and he's forward pressure, and he's battling, he's making it go. And I remember just looking up and saying, shut the F up. Like I was mad. And it wasn't really that I was mad at Khalid, and it definitely wasn't mad at that Grant scored. It was more like, Jesus, I'm tired. I got this guy chirping in my ear. Like, it just, but he could only do that to me at that time. Otherwise, it's a high school wrestler. I could find my ways around it, whatever. But he was just what was tough, man. And we had some good scraps. Grant would wear me down, but he never ran away from me. Go ahead, Grant. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So just going off that, do you remember when John kicked me out of Elite for
yes,
like an entire summer, and I was wrestling with you like every day?
Yeah, and then he wanted to let you go back into Elite, but you didn't want to.
I was like, no, I don't want to. I want to keep wrestling with Anthony.
As much as I love John, he would not like that part of the story. But like, he got kicked out of Elite. I forgot why. I think it actually had something to do with your dad and John.
It probably was.
I think they were arguing, and that's what kind of happened. I don't think it even had anything to do with Grant. So John, was being funny or whatever, and he's like, and he's with you. He's only coming to the 7 o'clock practice. I'm like, okay, that's great. Then I have Grant keep me in shape. 2, he could help me with practice, and he could coach other kids, and it kind of feeds off what we were talking about with Camacho. Like, I think if I remember correctly, Grant, correct me if I'm wrong, I used to have you pretty much coach the whole practice.
Oh yeah, no, I was definitely
you would do our things,
moves and stuff. Yeah.
And then when it was time to go live, I would go live with you, and that's when you would get better because we would work on certain things when you were going live. But you were coaching. Like, it wasn't like I wasn't going to make him drill with a JV guy that could probably hurt him by mistake, not knowing what he was going to do. I'm pretty sure that Grant was coaching, and it was time to go live. We would get our 3 or 4 goes in, and then he would get out of there. And that was his practice for a couple months. And I think he made a pretty big jump in that time.
I totally agree. Do you remember like at what point that was? Was that like?
That might have been the spring, summer. No, that might have been the fall of your senior year.
Well, you think so? It might have been, honestly.
Senior year, because that's when I always was close to Grant, like I said, but we got a lot closer later in his high school career. I feel like as he got bigger, so he needed me to wrestle with him. I think that kind of built our relationship. We went to Journeyman. I think he was at Journeyman that same year. Jacob, the lights went out. He lost a close match, like a top 10 guy. He was in that same, right there. But I remember talking to Coach Dubuque at that tournament and saying, no, Grant's a good one. Like, that's somebody that and now he's one of his coaches at Princeton, so it seemed to work out. But yeah, I remember a lot of those stories. Coach, were you about to say something? I don't want to stop you from jumping in there.
I think there's two elements in that story that make for a great wrestler. One, the time he spent just play wrestling, and two, the time he spent coaching.
Yeah.
Those two things make you reflect, they make you think, and they make you build your whole intuition around wrestling. A lot of times we just spend too much time drill, match. I think the season's too short and too much packed into it, where you guys are doing all year, and there's time for helping other kids. There's time for play wrestling, where in a season, we have 3 months to take a wrestler who doesn't even know how to do a stance and make him into something. So it's very
hard.
Those are the times where you really build, I think.
Grant, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Grant was one of the first guys in the club that really brought that play wrestle, scramble is a great scrambler, but sparring mentality. And because that was more, John was more Iowa style back then, just straight up, hey, very smart wrestler. John was still great technically back then. But he was more like, we're going to push the pace, which Grant was very good at too. Grant, I think, took aspects from a couple people there. But when he was with Askren, it was more, play wrestling, sparring, these type of things at a young age. And I think Grant kind of brought that into the club a little bit. You could speak on that a little bit, Grant, that transition.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I definitely remember that time when Max was in Somers as it was bizarre because, John, he didn't really like what was going on, but the reality is I think Max was great in the long term for the club because like you said, it brought like a different mentality. It brought a different, almost like a different style, know. And in terms of from a personal level, I feel like my style of wrestling perfectly embodies the combination of John and Max.
Right.
I can scramble and wrestle like a freak like Max, and I can push the pace and be a hard ass like John. And you put those two together, and it's worked out pretty well. Yeah.
I was actually about to jump in there when you said that because I feel like Max is a great coach. I didn't really have the pleasure of dealing with him too much because he was across the hall from us or whatever. But I know he was good. Obviously, he was a great wrestler. But I wouldn't say he was better than John. But I wouldn't say John was better than him. It's more of the aspect that you put both of them together. I think that's what made it work. And Grant brought that transition to us. Grant, before we finish high school and get a little bit into college here, I'm kind of curious of your thoughts on this because I asked Camacho a similar question. And me and DeBellis talk about this stuff all the time. Maybe sometimes I bore Kara with stuff like this, like, oh, you don't even understand it, it's, whatever. Is the relationship with what you learned through this sport. And because to me, Grant's learned it the right way, right? There's people out there that are super successful and they're just freak athletes and they're talented that they got kind of far, but they didn't really get the core, I believe, of what you should be learning in this sport, if that makes sense. I feel like Grant always got it. When I would give my speeches or talks and I probably was being annoying a little bit and just talking at the end of practice, Grant was always locked in. Other people would be kind of like, oh, whatever, but I think Grant always, and Camacho was always locked in. I think Grant kind of liked the mental aspect of it. It's just you out there kind of thing. But to me, it goes hand in hand with everything I do. Like my mindset's molded from this sport. Maybe talk on that a little bit, Grant, what you think about maybe this sport and mindset and all that stuff in your real life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And let me just start by saying, yeah, those little speeches you would give at the end of practice, I was listening.
Yeah.
And they were great.
Thanks, Grant.
And in terms of so it's no secret that wrestling is 99% mental. And I truly believe that. And I think that's reflected, in my wrestling, and it's also reflected in my actions outside of the room as well. You look at, if you watch me wrestle, like you said before, I'm not giving up. I'm going to make it the hardest match you've ever wrestled. I don't care who you are. I don't care how good you are. I'm going to be a pain in the ass. And you know, when you transfer that over to like a real life scenario, it's like, as cliche as it sounds, never give up. As stupid and cliche as, you know, that sounds coming out of my mouth,
But it doesn't.
that's the reality of it, you know, and that's one of the greatest lessons I've learned from wrestling. And the thing is, I wasn't told that lesson. I learned that lesson. You know what I mean? And that's the difference. You can tell someone never give up. It just goes in one ear, out the other. If they actually learned and were taught how to never give up, then that's going to be the thing that transfers over into real life.
I really like how you said that, and similar to Coach, right? Kind of almost what similar idea of what Kamancha was saying. And you know, the unfortunate part about life, I feel like, is that it's not always going to be cookie cutter easy, right? You know, we're gonna have ups and downs. You know, you're gonna have, you know, good days, bad days, great things are gonna happen, bad things are gonna happen. You're gonna have to be able to go to work and do your thing or whatever it may be. You know, regardless of what's happening in your life, right? And I think wrestling is similar. You could have a cold, but you're going to have to go out there and compete if you want to win a state title. You know, you could have a dislocated elbow and you go out there and win a state title, right? And I think, Coach, you could jump in on that before that, but I think that's a good transition to go into a senior year. But about the mentality stuff that Grant was talking about, what'd you think about what he was saying there?
100%. I think watching a guy like Grant wrestle is always fun for the crowd. Because like you were saying, if you wrestle Cal Sanderson, say, you know you're going to give all you got. You're going to try to win, and it's never over until it's over. So yeah, I mean, it's been fun watching you all these years from afar, but now it's going to be even more fun watching you after this interview compete there at Princeton.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I can't wait. But now let's transition, because I think we just fed into a transition, because just like I said, in life, you know, you got to show up. You got to keep showing up. You don't know, and you don't know what's going to happen, but you got to show up ready to go every day. You don't know what tomorrow's not promised. Nothing's promised to you. Nothing. Success is not promised to you. Nothing is. So you have to figure it out. Grant was probably thinking in his head, I'm cruising to a state title my senior year. Maybe not cruising, but he's like, everything's working out. The fall's looking good. I'm wrestling really good. I'm a 7 o'clock member of the club now, and that's working out for me. All these things are going well, and he's feeling great. And I remember he was feeling really good, and he was about ready to make that. He was already a state finalist, right? But he was about ready to be dominant. Like, he was already dominant in the section, but I'm talking about like beating guys in the country and just really, really good.
And let me just, I was already nationally ranked at this point as well.
Oh, really? See, I didn't even know that. So there you go. But he goes to Ironman. Russell's great. I believe you beat some nationally ranked guys there too, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. He's in – first, you had a guy beat, something happened, and then you got thrown into the wrestlebacks, correct? And that's when you got hurt against Ramirez?
Let me run you through here, because Ramirez was actually the one that bumped me to the wrestlebacks.
Oh, yeah, you wrestled him twice. But tell the story, because your memory obviously will be way better than mine in this.
Okay, so Ironman, for anyone who doesn't know what Ironman is, it's a tournament out in Ohio. Touted as maybe the toughest high school tournament there is. It's hard. Maybe I would say hardest in season high school tournament there is. Every weight class has at least 10 ranked guys in there. New Yorkers had never been allowed to wrestle in Ironman before because of ridiculous reasons. I can't really tell you the reasons, but my dad got Ironman sanctioned in New York as a tournament that we can go to. So, of course, who else, right? So my senior year, he somehow manages to get Ironman sanctioned in New York, like single-handedly. And you remember Jake Silverstein?
Yep.
So me and Silverstein were the first two New Yorkers to ever wrestle in Ironman. Yeah, pretty cool, right? Yeah. But anyway, do pretty good first two matches. I think I'm in the quarters. I'm wrestling the 1 seed, Julian Ramirez. Had a decent match. I think he was beating me most of the match. He was up by like 2 at the end, tried something, didn't work. He won, whatever. He moves on to the semis. I go to the wrestlebacks. I win my matches in the wrestlebacks. He loses in the semis, gets bumped down to the wrestlebacks. Long story short, we see each other in the Conti finals, wrestling for third, fourth.
Wow.
I am killing this kid. I'm killing him.
I
It
remember
was
watching
like,
this match live. I remember watching it.
yeah. Yeah, the kid had nothing on me. He wasn't scoring any points. I was riding him. I was feeling really good about the match. There's like a minute left in the third period. I'm up 4-1. He's on bottom. He stands up. I go to lift and return him. He does a standing Granby and dislocates and fractures my elbow in the process. Match over. I'm done. I would show you the video, but it's not very nice to watch. Anyway, so match over. I take fourth. I drive back home, go to the emergency room because my mom's a nurse, so she wanted me to go home before I saw any doctors, which made sense. So we drive back home, see a doctor, get X-ray, MRI, CAT scan, all the things. And I had, like I said before, I had dislocated my elbow, and in the process of the dislocation, I had fractured the little, so you got like the ball and the cup here. I like fractured off like the edge of the cup. So I was hurt. It wasn't good. My doctors were telling me I probably wasn't gonna be able to make it back for the rest of the season. I was looking at about 2 months recovery. So I was like, I was upset. I didn't think I was going to ever get my state title. I was like easily the top dog for, up until that point. I had virtually no contenders in the state. And that all just, went down the drain because it seemed like my season was over. Yeah.
Before I jump in on that, Grant, now, I want people that are listening to this, hopefully a lot of our kids are still listening to this, and it's a little bit of what we talked about with Camacho yesterday or 2 days ago or whatever, is just like life, like we were talking about before, that's why I think it's a good transition. And wrestling, sometimes shit happens, right? And you could either let it define you and go down a road that you don't want to go down and that's not going to be beneficial to you, or you could, pull your bootstrings up and figure it the hell out. And Grant, obviously this is to another level than what most normal people probably are even capable of doing. But I remember at this point, and then I'm going to let Grant continue with the season here, and he's going to kind of walk us through it because his memory is going to be better than mine on this. Until states, my memory is very good then. Let's preface back, too, that he lost a very close state finals match his junior year, and he told me that there's no way that he was going to lose again his senior year, right? And I believed him, and all of this happens, the elbow, and hopefully everybody realizes and thinks about what he just said. It wasn't like he had a sprained wrist. It wasn't like he broke a finger. It wasn't like he broke his hand. It wasn't anything like that. This was a very serious injury against a very serious competitor at a very serious tournament. And to add to all of that, Grant says there was no contenders, but the returning New York State champ was in his weight class.
He wasn't. He was at 82.
Oh, he bumped down when you got hurt.
He bumped down when I got hurt.
There, but that's still another layer to this that even builds on, to me, even builds on Grant's legend of what ended up happening from then on out. And I think that's important, but we could get to how maybe he changed weights. One thing I want to add too that we didn't talk about is how dominant Grant was in high school. People tend to forget, this is no knock at Jake Logan. Jake Logan's a great wrestler, 2-time state champ, beat our guy fair and square in the finals, doing really well in college right now. But as far as I know, Jake Logan never got a win over Grant and purposely stayed away from Grant because he wasn't going to beat Grant. And we all know, and everybody in Section 1 knows how successful and how good Jake Logan was. So, people need to realize the level of wrestling that Grant was at, especially when he was firing on all cylinders, because it was crazy. But Grant, finish the story. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I just wanted those guys to realize, listen to what we're talking about here. This isn't like, I twisted an ankle. So go on. Yeah.
So I saw like 3 doctors, got 3 different opinions. They were all telling me the same thing. 2 of them were even telling me I needed surgery, which would have guaranteed that I wasn't making it back for the season. One of them was like, I don't think you need surgery. I think it'll probably heal on its own. So I was like, what am I supposed to do here? I can't do anything. I couldn't even lift. So because I just stopped. I was in one of those bionic arm braces from my wrist up to my shoulder here. I still have it in the attic. I put it on sometimes just for fun. Take me back. But nah.
You heard that laugh? That was a laugh of a crazy killer right there. But go on.
Yeah, but so time went on. I was watching my teammates compete, watch Eastern States, watch some random kid win my weight class at Eastern States. You know, we got closer and closer to, the qualifying tournaments. And I was like, I was like, all right, we're healing. We're getting better, you know? Continued. I was doing a ton of physical therapy. I was going like 3 times a week. And that probably helped a lot, honestly. I don't think I gave them enough credit. But as we go on, I realize I might actually be able to make it back. So I buy myself a brace that I can wrestle with. But wind it back a bit. So I didn't step back on the mat until a week before divisionals. I don't know. Yeah, until
Well, you got a waiver.
Huh? Oh yeah, I did. I got a waiver. I got it. Yeah, I got a waiver.
Did you get a waiver? Did you have to have 6 competitions or no? Or
Yeah,
did you already have 2?
I didn't have enough. I had to get a waiver.
Yeah.
Okay, but they granted you the waiver.
They granted me the waiver to wrestle at divisionals.
And I remember.
Divisionals at Greeley.
It was at Greeley.
It was at Greeley, yeah.
I remember too.
I had yeah. So I had gone to maybe one practice before divisionals. Got to divisionals. I hadn't wrestled. I hadn't wrestled for 2 months. Once I got to divisionals, got to the finals, DQ'd. Wasn't gonna mess around.
Grant, did we forfeit to you too? We did, right? Yeah, we did. I think
you guys?
I think your first round match we forfeited purposely, so you didn't have to have another match.
Thanks, Ant.
I mean, we knew what would happen, and then I think you pinned the one kid or whatever in the semis, and then
just forfided the finals. Yeah.
But you actually did not use that arm. I remember you did not.
No, use I didn't use it at all.
Didn't use it. I remember that too, and then what's crazy is if I remember correctly too, Grant. And the thing about Grant too, and I'll add this in. I know we're kind of all over the place, but it's good stuff. Is Grant, like Jacob said, also he never. I don't know about him and John, maybe in private conversations, but with me at least, whenever we would talk, he never didn't listen. Right? He maybe said, "Oh, maybe I'll do it this way or whatever," but. I remember talking to him about the injury. I remember talking about how he should drill, maybe if he should wrestle the finals match at divisionals or he shouldn't wrestle the finals match at divisionals. He always wanted to bounce things off people, and he never thought that it was his way or the highway kind of thing, which I think helped his wrestling and helped just his growth. And if I remember correctly, Grant, you're going to jump in here too because I said my memory shit. I know you wrestled the Eastchester kid again in the finals, but how was that tournament? I can't. If I remember correctly, you dominated, but I can't really.
Sectionals?
Yes.
Pinned my way through sectionals.
Was it Crowley you wrestled?
Balali.
Crowley was older. That was like Malikin's age. He graduated, I think, the year or two before. Tough wrestler, but no Grant. So he pinned his way through sectionals, all that stuff.
Wait, hold on. Let me pause you for a second because we got to go back to how Barnes was up at 82.
Oh yeah, I want to hear that. Yeah.
Tyler Barnes, right?
And wait, Grant, before you even go there, because again, you're almost like bringing stuff back to my mind.
Yeah.
That you, Jacob, Grippy, you guys were all seniors that year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So Barnes was up there with Jake Logan, Jacob Ferreira, and those 3 guys kind of were like the cream of the crop up there at the moment.
Kid from Hilton too. Deep Perez.
It was tough too. Yeah, it was a tough weight
so,
too.
So 82 was a tough weight class, and I honestly I don't blame him for dropping down, but at the same time, joke's on him. Yeah. Because, he figured, if I can, he probably certified at 70, and he figured, well, there's a lot of competition up at 82, and there was. 82 was stacked that year. He was like, all right, I guess I'll go down to 70 and just, wrestle there, pick up my last state title. I guarantee you he had no idea I was coming back. I guarantee you had no clue. No one had any idea. No one had any idea, and then I just showed up at divisionals.
Except us.
Except you, yeah.
But me and you, I don't know if you remember this, and this is getting real deep into these layers, right? I don't know if Grant remembers this, but me and Grant spoke, and I was like, Grant, are you – and I wanted him to wrestle because I love the hype.
100%.
Of course, and I love the story. I love Grant. I wanted Grant to get a state title, and I love the story of it, and I love the legend that he's building of himself from doing something so crazy like this. I love that stuff, right? But at the end of the day, if he knew he wasn't going to wrestle and that came out, there was the thought, there was the thought of Jacob Ferreira going down to 170. And I remember saying that to Grant, like, are you sure you're coming back? Because if you're sure you're coming back, he's not coming down. But if you're not coming back, I might bring him down. On the flip side, and I hope Jacob watches, he's going to be like, what? I never told Jacob that because I never wanted Jacob to have thoughts that I didn't trust him or I didn't believe in him. And that wasn't the case. I did think I fully believed he could beat Jake Logan 110%. But my thing was that he was he had a little weight to lose probably. He probably could have got down. And if Grant wasn't wrestling and all of these guys were still up at 182, it's like, why wouldn't we do that, right? Why wouldn't we do that? But then, it almost ended up to me being this close to the perfect storm. Because we'll talk about Grant's story and he comes back and does his thing, but Jacob was very close in the weight class above it. It was almost back-to-back state championships, and you couldn't write a better story than that, to me, for a coach that loved both of these guys. Unfortunately, it didn't work out as well for Jacob, but, we've been there, done that, talked about that. Jacob had a lot of pluses that came from that situation. So, Grant, go back in now. I'll bring it back to you. So, Barnes is coming down to 82.
Right. And I knew that as well going into I think because everyone wrestles the qualifiers at the same time. So I found out like he was up at 82 the whole season. And then he came even at Easterns, he was at 82 at Easterns, wasn't he?
No, because Jacob Logan and Jacob.
He must have had half of his
Unless he
competitions
didn't
at
wrestle.
70 though.
I don't think he wrestled at he didn't wrestle at Easterns.
He didn't wrestle at Easterns.
Because he had a cakewalk of a season. He didn't wrestle any hard tournaments.
And he was probably being sneaky, like Coach said. He probably was making these weigh-ins at 70 because the kid, and we're getting into real deep wrestling talk. People are probably like, what are they talking about? That's fine because that's what this is all about. I don't care. If you want to watch it, don't watch it. I don't care. Barnes wrestles 165 at NC State now. He's not starting, but he's not a huge guy. He's Grant's size. They're very similar in size. So he probably sneakily got the weigh-ins at 70 because he could do it without killing himself, but was wrestling at 82 to kind of maybe play possum to guys like Grant. That's probably what he was doing.
Yeah, because I had no idea that he had come down to 70 until I found out he was at 70. They brought out the updated state rankings. I was like, what? Yeah. He's at 70 now? But I was like, all right, yeah, let's go.
Well, Coach, think about this. I mean, I'm gonna let Grant keep telling us about the matches itself because his memory is so good. But let's run through it, right? Great off season, great junior year, great off season. I think he could have won that match his junior year and been a two-time state champ, but it is what it is. Has a great off season, great summer, great fall. Great Ironman is beating the number one seed in the tournament. Horrible injury, not looking good for a return. And now you're back, but you're back with no practice, getting ready for the state tournament, and the returning state champion is in your weight class, and you think you're going to win it. And how did you have that confidence?
Okay. Well, basically, I was like, yeah, I'm not losing. It's like there's no option here. It's either win or nothing else. Winning is the only option that I saw in that scenario. I had no other choice. And to make the story even more interesting, I don't know if you knew this, Anthony. I weighed in 7 pounds under at States.
Wow, I did not know that.
Because I had lost a bunch of muscle mass because I wasn't doing anything.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I was 7 pounds under at States, and now we have this 82-pounder dropping down to 70, and I really was a 60-pounder at that point, So just to add, just make it even
just
more
layers. There's layers to this. And now I'll let Grant talk about the matches themselves, but I'm going to tell you guys, people that are listening, this quick story before I forget about the state tournament. First of all, Grant, I think cruises through the first two matches, semis was tight.
Tough, tight.
It was tight for him. It was tight for Jacob Ferreira. It was tight for Grippy. It was tight for Halil right after those guys. There was 4 matches for Section 1 that it all came down to a point in the third period. It was insane, and we won every single one of them. So it was an insane round. Oh, my God. I think I lost, hopefully I'll live now to 160 instead of 170 because of that. But you see what I did there, D? That's like a ridiculously high age. But so we did that. But
yeah.
The story I want to tell before Grant talks about the semis, we should talk about both of those, is so my dad, Paulie had a press box, my Adam's dad, because of Dunkin' Donuts. He has a press box at the Pepsi Arena or whatever, Times Union Center or whatever you call it. He had a press box. So my dad was up there, and ironically, a lot of people that were sitting there were Barnes people. I guess, somehow. I don't know, maybe because they're locals. They had
Nice.
half the booth. They had half the
Nice.
booth. My dad had the other half or something. I
Yep.
don't know how it happened. And they were talking so much crap that Barnes was going to beat Grant in the finals. So I remember my dad betting them like $50 that Grant was going to win. Yeah, this really happened. And my
Wow.
dad, you don't even know the whole thing. It actually gets even better. So my dad yells, right? And my dad knows Grant, but he didn't know Grant that well, but he knew Grant enough that he knew he was a kid I coached. He liked Grant, he liked his dad. Like, he obviously wanted Grant to win a state championship. So my dad's a yeller. So he's like, I'm going to leave the box for the state finals because I got all these Barnes people here and I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'll go up, one level up and I'll yell from up there. So he goes up, he makes a $50 bet, he goes up, and Grant wins, right? And we'll talk about all that stuff later. And there's so many layers in that match I want Grant to talk about too, because it was ballsy there too, and it's an awesome story as well. So my dad goes up there. I guess he goes back down to kind of rub it in their face and maybe collect.
They're gone.
Gone. $50 is just sitting on the table though. That's the only thing that's.
Oh, they did pay up. All right.
$50, and they were out of the booth, and it was like a "got you, sucker" moment. But so Grant, I just had to get that in because I knew I would maybe forget it. But so the semifinals was tight. The senior finals was legend. The finals were legendary. Walk us through the semis and the finals.
Okay. Oh, and before I do that, I
Okay,
just want to point out one thing.
Yeah.
The 2 weeks in between sectionals and states, I grinded harder than I ever grinded in my whole life, and with you too. I'm sure you remember how hard I was doing workouts like 2-3 times.
Other than Empire and Brewster, where were you going to practice?
Nowhere.
John Jay.
Really?
Oh, Greeley. What am I saying? Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, no, but we were
Steven
grinding.
came over.
At Greeley.
And Steven came with us. The Fox Lane guys were there. Grippy was there.
Yeah.
Aaron, Jacob. We had a whole crew going. I think there was one day I was going with Jacob, and Steven was going with Grant, and Aaron and Grippy were working, and we had a nice crew going. But so go on, Grant. Yes, he worked his tail off, but I think anybody that's been listening to this interview, I think that's just kind of expected at this point.
What place did Grilly take that year at States?
I know. Are you asking me? You're not asking me, are you?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I didn't know. I forget.
Seventh in the state, brother. But we
good.
also took seventh in the polling.
We had three guys.
Yeah,
Hey.
3 all-state guys. It was a good day for us. But so go ahead, Grant. Talk us through this stuff. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so the semis match was a tight one against a Section 11 guy. Don't remember his name.
I don't remember either, but he was tough.
It was really tough. That match really came down to a caution point that he gave up, and I'm okay with divulging this information right now. But it was like this. I don't think anyone scored in the first period. It was like 0-0. The match was super tight. I think I wound up winning 2-1.
Yeah,
and it was 2-1. It was 2-1. Second period, I choose bottom. Kid false starts, caution. Kid false starts again, second caution. And I'm like, fuck, I'm in a tight match here. I'm going to try and draw this third caution on him. So right before the ref blew the whistle, I gave a little jolt. I shrugged my shoulders a little bit, and the kid moved, and the ref hits him with the third caution.
That's wrestling.
That's just smart wrestling.
Smart wrestling.
That's Matt savvy.
That's savviness, and that's years and years of knowing how that works.
Yeah, but I didn't really feel really good about that. But
I wouldn't care.
Yeah, whatever, right?
I wouldn't care at all.
But that kudos to that kid though, because that was a super tight match.
Didn't the match end with him having a single up too? Didn't he have a single?
Yeah, I think so. But no one can score on me in a single.
I knew that, but I remember standing. I think it's funny that you say that, Grant. I think that the kid had the single. I think I was standing with somebody that knew you but didn't know you maybe as well as I knew you, and they were like, "Oh my god, he has a single. Oh my god." I'm like, he's not going to finish that. He's not going to finish that. And it ended up, and he didn't finish it, and it was crazy. Now, to me, all of this stuff is, your senior year, the injury, it's all legendary, but I think it all culminates with this tournament. And D, I don't know if you know all of this from this match, but it was pretty crazy how this all went down. So Grant, talk us through the whole thing, how you looked at John, the whole, wrap this up for us. Not the whole thing, but the state tournament.
Yeah. So the finals match. Yeah. This was a pretty highly anticipated match. I was definitely freaking out, but I was ready. one of the most high scoring matches I've ever wrestled, honestly. When I wrestle, there's a lot of action in my matches, but they're not super high scoring. But this one, the final score was 13-10. We can get there. Kid scores the first takedown. I was like, oh, here we go, and it's funny because you can see in the video, you can see his coaches in the corner. He gets a takedown. They're all smiling, writing something down on the clipboard, all happy, like, oh, state finals,
Yeah, we're cruising.
Yeah, and I get out. I don't remember. I guess I might get a takedown on him in the first. Actually, no, I don't. I think the first period ends 2-1. I'm down. Or you know what? He might have taken me down 2 times. I think he took me down 2 times. First period ended, I was down like 4-2. Second period, I think I escaped. It's so hard to get the exacts of this match. Let me just take you to the important part, okay? Yeah. Third period comes around, scores really tight. I think one of us chooses bottom and we get out, and I am up by 1. No. Hold on. I got to think here. You got to give me a moment here because it's important.
Take your time.
So it was all right. Okay. Reversing.
There's definitely, to help you, Grant, I think there was definitely a time you were down by 2. You got the takedown, and then you went for the go-ahead. You cut him to go for the win kind of thing.
So what happened was he took me down. I reversed him. When I reversed him, we were tied. Okay. So I think we were tied.
Yeah.
We were tied after whoever escaped in the third. It was tied. Mm-hmm. He takes me down. He's up by 2. I reversed him. Now we're tied again with about 30 seconds left. We're on the edge of the mat towards like my side. So I got my coaches over there. It's tied up on the edge. We go out of bounds. I honestly hadn't been doing a great job of keeping him down, so I wasn't really sure what to do here. I look at my high school coaches. They're just like, they have no clue. Yeah. I look at John. John just goes like this. He goes neutral. And I was like, okay, look at the ref, neutral. Like no hesitation, no thought whatsoever. I was like, John told me to go neutral. I'm going neutral. So I go neutral, which puts me down by 1 with 30 seconds left. Yeah. This kid goes to the ref. He goes, injury time. I need my inhaler. I was like, oh, you're done. The match is over. I was like, that was like blood in the water for me right there. I knew immediately. The second he called injury time, I was like, you are finished. There's no way you're winning. Kid gets his inhaler, takes a drink, gets his little breather, comes back out. Like I said, there's like 30 seconds left. We go. I get in on like a pretty deep high crotch. We do a quick scramble. I wind up scrambling through, putting him on his back for 4. So the final score was 13-10. So it was 10-9. So it was 9-9, and then I cut him. It was 10-9 him, and then I got a 4-pointer to end the match 13-10. And it was just like, I think just that how like John told me to go neutral and I went neutral without like a single hesitation or second thought, just like shows the trust that I have and the relationship that I've had with both John and you for, almost my entire career up to that point.
It was crazy. I remember it like it was yesterday. Is that what you've been trying to pull up? Is this the end of the match, Coach?
Yeah, it is.
Boom, down by 1 in the state finals. Iranian almost. Oh my God, I remember this like it was yesterday. I wish the camera angle was on the other side so we could see everybody.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
Who's that jumping down? That's Zach Finn up there.
Yeah, right? Yeah. But it was like, so that's a scramble, right? That's the old Max Askren coming.
Oh my God! And the backs. I remember
the swipes.
Look at the coaches. Look at the coaches. They're like shit.
Yeah, they're not. There's another clipboard.
Yeah.
What happened to your clipboard, boys? He's still keeping score on the clipboard for what? He's a senior. Why are you writing that?
That's what I'm saying.
What are you keeping that for?
Kid's all pissed, slaps the mat. I'm like, let's go.
Do you know what was crazy?
Yeah, let's go, baby. Get some.
D, the emotions, though. You got to think, D. Put yourself back in that. we were getting ready for maybe our biggest match as just
Jacob, yeah.
ever. But at the same time, I had this, connection with Grant, who I've been coaching for years as well. He just wins maybe the biggest match of his career. It was like a whirlwind of things. I think I gave you a big hug right after the match. We hugged, and then you slapped Jacob 5 or something like that. And then Jacob went to wrestle, and I just jumped right back into okay, now I need to be back into this. And it was just this crazy event that happened. But I think people need to realize, because that whole story is unbelievable, but some of them are not as big as wrestling heads maybe as us, and they won't be like, oh, it was 2, it was 3, it was this. People that are listening that maybe don't understand this. Bad injury, out the whole season, comes back, state finals, tough tournament, in there with a kid that's the returning New York State champ, reverses the kid to tie it with 30 seconds left. Most people probably would say try to ride out to overtime. I totally, and I'm not just saying it to jump on the good side of what happened, I totally agree with what John said, because if Grant gives him a escape with 4 seconds left, you're done. You lost your state title, and Grant was wrestling tough on his feet, and Grant's the type of guy you bet on. You bet on Grant. So Grant betted on himself, and John thought that was the right idea. He goes neutral and has the fortitude to get the takedown with 30 seconds left. The intensity, the legend of that story, hopefully will continue to be told, because the whole idea of how that happened, that's will. That's purely will. That's not, of course, wrestling skill, athleticism, strength, flexibility, all these things came into play. But if it wasn't for Grant's will, none of that would have mattered. It could have ended in November, December at Ironman when he dislocated his elbow. Instead, he's a state champ, being a returning state champ in dramatic fashion on a crazy call, betting for himself. So I hope that everybody realizes how insane that is. It's not like the guy caught a guy and he got 4 points. It wasn't like that. There was a lot that went into that. And I hope that that story is, when people listen to this, it gets its justice, because it deserves a lot of justice. So it's fun. It was a lot of fun, wasn't it? It was fun, wasn't it, Grant?
It was fun. It was fun. And the emotions after that match, it was like after, when the ref blew the whistle and the match was over, it was like a screen over my eyes. Like, I had no idea. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what was going on. All I knew was that I did it. That's all I knew. I was like, I did it. Let's go.
So deserved. And Jacob said in his interview, you get what you earn. Nothing is deserved. But if there was a such thing as somebody that did deserve that win, it was Grant. And I think another guy that deserved it was Jacob Frere, and it didn't happen that way for him. But fortunately, it did happen for Grant, and I'm so happy that he was able to walk out of there with that done. And a fun fact, Section 1 right now owns the 170-pound weight class. Grant, state champ. Aaron won the next year. Tyler Albus beat Quincy Downs this year. We're 3 for 3, and Empire owns the 170 weight class. And not to pat myself on the back, but some coach at Empire weighs around 170 pounds, and I think that might be somebody.
John,
yeah.
John, yeah, 170.
Oh, what did funny joke. I hope people don't get this deep into this. I hope they do to hear that, but maybe not this joke, because it's hysterical. Chris Perry. John was wearing Chris Perry goes to Brunswick, and John was wearing a Brunswick shirt today, and goes, Chris, I want a 4XL for Christmas, blah, blah, blah. And I want a new one. And Chris is like, I got you, John. And then I looked at Chris and I go, Chris, I want a 4XL for a blanket.
That'd be a nice blanket.
Oh, man, that was fun. But Grant,
that like a dress.
I'll never forget that. I'm sure you won't, your dad won't, the Brewster family, your parents, your mom, your sisters. Nobody will forget that, Coach Sabellis. It's hard to forget that, anybody, but that's what we do this for, right? Like, we do it for a lot of things, but those moments, even as a coach, for me, that, like I said, it sucked because Jacob took the loss after, but the way Jacob handled the loss, all the things that went into it, I was very proud of him. And Grant made me go home with a smile on my face, because I saw, that was just, it was great. Now, Grant, you could put more onto that, or we could go into how you we're in Princeton College before we wrap this thing up. So you could add more to the state, or we could talk about how the transition from high school to college.
Yeah, we could move on from that, although it is a great story.
It is.
Yeah, so, and also just throughout the whole, my whole time being injured, I was like talking with the Princeton coaches, because I was already committed to Princeton at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hey, like, this is the situation I'm in. Do you think I should wrestle? And they were like, listen, you got to do what you want to do right now. We're not going to tell you yes. We're not going to tell you no. So I did what I wanted to do, and it worked out.
Worked out great. I'm sure I
I
think
thought it was a great. I thought it was awesome.
it's awesome, but maybe Coach,
Like just watching it from an outsider.
I'm going to ask you, Coach Tabellis, as a coach, right? Now, say you were the coach at Princeton. I personally might say, you're
I
coming.
probably said I wouldn't want him to.
Yeah, you're a stud. You don't need to do it. But if I'm that coach and he decided to do it and he did what he did, I might be sitting there like, we got one here. You know what I mean? Like
Well, they had one. I mean, they had
they
one
had him,
already. I mean,
they
they
had him
had one.
already.
They knew
But
it.
I think that kind of like engraved it like, oh shoot, this guy is for real. And I think I remember talking to you, Grant, a little bit about maybe not about Princeton itself, because what do I know about an Ivy League school? But I think we talked a little bit about Dubuque and how much I liked him as a coach. And I feel like, and I want you to talk about this a little bit now, maybe, but I feel like you guys probably meshed really well because he's a hard nosed guy. He likes the intensity of it. So tell me how like the college room compares maybe to your high school career and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So the transition into college, it's like a different sport.
Yeah.
It's so different. You walk into a college room and just the energy in the room is not the same as when you walk into a high school room. The intensity is so much different.
Yeah.
And it's something that, most freshmen, and I certainly had my issues with it as well. I didn't have a great freshman year in college. I started for like 2 matches. And yeah, I didn't do great, but the learning curve required from going from high school to college is certainly there. And some people are able to pick up on it right away. You get some high school studs who are already beating college guys, and that exists. But then you got everyone else who's got to actually get to the D1 level. You might have been recruited to a D1 school, but you got to actually get to the D1 level. And some people make it, some people don't. And I like to think I've made it. I think, I had a pretty successful year my sophomore year. But the biggest differences in my mind is just the pace. Is really just the pace of it. Things don't really slow down when you're wrestling a college match. In high school, you're hand fighting with the guy, and there's not a whole lot of movement, and it's high school wrestling. Once you get to college, my style is very different now. I do a lot of things that I never did in high school now, and a lot of things I did in high school I don't do anymore now. And that's okay, because like I said, it's like a different sport. You have to adapt to the new environment. And not only that, but the new coaches as well. So, in my high school career, I had Anthony, I had John, I had my high school coaches, and that was all right. But now I have four new coaches who are all amazing, great wrestlers themselves. They all have very unique skill sets, and they all have a lot to offer. And I think you got to be open-minded is one important thing. You can't rely on the technique you used in high school in college, because it's probably not going to work anymore. You got to be willing to learn new things. You got to be willing to try new things, and you got to be willing to grind, and you got to be willing to work hard, because that's what you have to do.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And for people listening, in his college room, Princeton's a team that when I was in college, I believe it kind of just came back, or was only back for a couple of years. They were not very competitive when I was in college, and then they kept getting better. And this year they beat Cornell, I believe, for the first time, and won the Ivy League dual meet championship for the first time, if I remember correctly. Is that right, Grant? Oh, there's the ring. Boom, Ivy League champs. And you know what, though? It's telling.
I did not even know that. I might have known that. But
it's telling that Grant was part of that program, though. And actually, it was interesting. I very much tuned into that match because Adam was wrestling in that match as well. So Adam wrestled at 57. He wrestled this guy, Quincy Monday, who I'm sure Grant's friends with, who I'm sure is a great kid. But obviously, I was pulling for Adam. And it ended up being a pretty good match. I think Monday won like 13-11 or 13. It was a good match. Mm-hmm. And then Grant came on next and beat the Cornell kid. I don't know who that was, though. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it was kind of cool to see them go back and forth and see two club guys in a high-level match like that, back and forth. And guys I knew since they were little wrestling at such a high level. It was really cool for me. And it's also cool for me that what we talked about before, having my connection with Coach Dubuque, who's one of Grant's coaches now. So we both had the same college coach in a sense. And I learned a lot from that guy, and I know that Grant's learning the same things right now, plus has 3 other great coaches in there. So I know the benefits that it is. Grant, 2 things, and then I'll kind of wrap this up because, I see D's getting a little sleepy over there. It's past his bedtime. One is,
An hour and a half.
oh, stop it. One is
I'm old.
the workouts, right? You said it doesn't slow down, like, wrestling around a little bit today. I'm wrestling around with Nino, who's great. He's going to be really good, but hopefully high school level, he is already pretty good, but it's slowed down. I could see what I want to see when I want to see it, right? But like when
Right.
guys come back, like last year when Grant came back, or I was rolling around with Jacob or even AJ, who's already ready to do, like, I think the D1 thing, you don't have time to think, right? You're always like kind of like you just have to react. You have to react. You have to react. You have to react. How are like the workouts? Maybe not technically wise, because we talked about that a little bit more with Jacob. Intensity wise, when you're having a hard day, like what are those kind of entail?
Like if it's like a hard workout, like we're going through a hard practice.
I'm curious to see like what the college level of a hard practice is.
Yeah. So you know how guys like to talk in the high school room? There is no word spoken at all.
Yeah.
None. For the whole practice, no one speaks. And not because you don't want to speak or because you get in trouble for speaking, just because you don't. You don't talk. You're busy wrestling.
Yeah.
You don't have time to talk. You don't have time to put your thoughts towards words because you're focused on what you're doing. So that's like one thing. Something, that's a huge difference. And also, it's like, when you're in a high school room, you got your good guys, you got your bad guys. That's just the reality of it. When you're in a Division I room, everyone's at a Division I level. So everyone's like really good and everyone can help anyone else get better. I've had, heavyweights show me moves. I've had the 125 pounder show me moves, and I've showed moves to each of them, but it's like being on a college team is also so much different than being on a high school or even club team, because it's like you're living with these guys, you're training with these guys, you're showering with these guys, you're together with them all the time. You go through the same things together. You have the ups together, you have the downs together, and it really just it builds a relationship between the guys you're wrestling with, and it makes me want to work harder for them, and it makes them want to work harder for me.
True. And Coach Sabellis, I think, would agree with that, and I definitely agree with that. Is my best friends to this day are my college teammates, because we went through something that other people don't understand, and I think Grant is building that relationship with his friends now. But a couple more things before I ask you this last question. I want 2 shout outs I need to give, because as we were sitting here, Sierra, one of the girls I coach, she complimented you on your joke with the jig, because I made them watch the Camacho interview. And your joke about audiobooks. Oh, audiobooks. I love audiobooks. I love reading those. Like, she thought you were funny, so I'll let you know that she thought your joke was good. But I'm very impressed with that young lady for sitting there. I'm telling my boys to do it. I've only got one guy so far sent me back the notes on the Camacho match, but Sierra sent me a note about it, and she screen recorded some of it, and she was checked in, and I really appreciate that. And she's going to be a superstar. And another shout out / dig I'm going to give at Dubuque and those Princeton people right now is Isabella Garcia. You guys missed a good one there, because she's a plus student, all these things, and she could have been at the RTC there. I think Eris is mad that Izzy beat his daughter a couple times. So there might be a little.
Izzy beat Sierra?
Yes, there might be a little. She's a beast. There might be a little tension there, but that's fine. She's at Michigan, setting the world on fire over there. We don't need Princeton, okay? We're fine. But so those are my 2 shout outs. But Grant, so we can wrap this thing. And I love Grant, though. Grant's the man, and I love Dubuque, so I'm just kidding. But they could have used Izzy. She's awesome. Anyway, school, last thing, and then we'll wrap it up, and I'll give you guys all last words. School and wrestling at a school that is so academically challenging like Princeton. How do you do it?
Oh, it's not easy.
Yeah. So what do you do? Because before you even say, let me preface this for the kids that are watching. You'll complain about your high school workload in wrestling. This guy's doing it at an Ivy League school that is very challenging, and he's wrestling at a very high level at the same time. So go ahead, Grant.
And I honestly, I'm going to bring this back to the whole team. Sorry, I'm like blanking on the word culture. Like team culture we have going on here. Like I said before, we do everything with these guys. We work out together. We study together. and we hold each other accountable. I think accountability is so important when we're talking about, you know, high level academics and high level athletics as well. If you're letting a guy slide, you're not helping him and he's not helping you. You got to hold each other accountable. You got to help the other guy, because if you help him, he's going to help you back, you know? And the reality is we all have a common goal here. We want to be the best wrestler we can be. We want to be the best team we can be, and we want to graduate.
Exactly.
So if we can work together on those things, we can make it happen.
I like
But,
that.
you know, there's no doubt that, you know, you also, like, on an individual level as well, you got to hold your own personal, you know, work ethic. And I think going back to wrestling, I have a certain work ethic when it comes to wrestling. And I think that transfers over to, you know, academics and, you know, the real life aspects. Wrestling has taught me how to be a hard worker.
Agree.
Now I'm a hard worker, not just as a wrestler, but through all aspects of life here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think me and Dee have talked about that before. Even at school, I know teaching's different, but people will be complaining about things, and I'm like, I just can't. My brain doesn't work like theirs. I'm like, wait, what? Like, you're complaining about what? We get like 50 days off this year. Like, what are you complaining about? Like, if it snows, we might not have to go in. Like, what is your issue? But that's neither here nor here. So let's wrap it up. Dee, you got your last words. I'll get my last words, and then Grant will wrap us up. Go ahead, Dee. Hit us.
Grant, thank you so much for coming on to this. This was really great. I was a big fan before, and I'm a bigger fan now. So thank you. Good luck and Godspeed through the rest of your career.
Thank you.
Same. You know, I mean, I can't say I was a bigger fan now. I've always been just a big fan, but you know, because we had that close relationship. That's, you know, D's been, but you know what though, D, compared to Camacho, you knew Grant pretty well. You know, especially that senior year, coming to work out and things like that with us. But
He
you know,
used to give some speeches too at the end of practice. I remember a couple of his speeches when he came
great
back.
speeches. He did last year when he came back. He gave a great speech because, and that's, you know, that's
Great
a
speech.
benefit that I think some of our Greeley guys don't realize, that with my connection with the club, because I don't know if Grant remembers this, but last year there was a situation I saw Grant hit in a match or something that he was good at, and I asked Grant to send me a recording of him doing it, and then I could show it at practice the next day. So he took Quincy Monday, who was a top 5 guy in the country, and I'll never forget this. He sent me the video. They were at practice. You saw the Prince and Mats everywhere. He showed me a little situation. I took that phone. I was like, okay. I'm like, this is what we're drilling today, watching the phone. Like, the advantages that I have as a coach, thanks to guys like Grant, sometimes goes unnoticed by some of our athletes. And it's a shame because they have the world at their fingertips. Like, you couldn't get any more. So that I want to point that out. But Grant, going back to you for my wrap up on you is, I'm very excited. Like I said, with Jacob, with your NCAA career, I feel like I'm sad what happened with COVID. We don't have to really go back to that because we talked about it with Jacob. I'm sure it was very similar for you. But my thoughts are you're very capable of winning an NCAA title. Every time you step on the mat, you're in a match. You're not getting bullied by anybody, especially anymore. Not that you ever did, but now at the college level, you're that guy. I look forward to seeing that. If you want to continue your wrestling career, I think the sky's the limit on what you do. But I also think the sky's the limit for a guy that's as smart as you and as hardworking as you, what you do in your outside of wrestling life. And I'm very much looking forward to, maybe not looking so forward to it because I don't want to get very old, but I'm looking forward to in 10, 15 years to see Grant with his kids and what he's doing for a living and watching his kids go through the youth circuit, and Grant being that dad, just like his dad, that's pushing, but loving his kid, setting a good example, not only for him, but the other kids that are in the area or whatever it may be. But Grant, go ahead, wrap it up, bud.
Yeah, thank you both so much for having me on. I think it's great what you guys are doing here, sort of putting a spotlight on individuals and just elevating the sport in general. I think that's important for wrestling. Keep it up. I'm always here if you want to do another one, or if you ever want a nice video for a move, let me know.
That's coming. You should expect that. That'll happen this year.
Oh yeah.
At some point, I will text you for something.
I got you. Don't even worry about it.
And if Jacob Frere is listening, he told me he learned a new setup to high crotch, and he was supposed to send me a video. And Grant sent it to me right away. I still haven't received my video, so you know we forget about the little people sometimes.
I'm gonna do a cowboy.
Get out of here.
Cowboy?
Finish your thing, Grant. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're getting loopy over there.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was a pleasure. It's nice talking about my career, and there will be more to it. Anthony, keep up the good work. Oh, hey, I never said this. Do you remember that little stupid coach award that Flo did? They were like, you know,
the hometown hero thing.
yeah, yeah. I spent like 2 hours writing a recommendation for you. You didn't get it though. I'm really upset.
Do you know what's funny about that? Khalid, first of all, I appreciate you doing that. Second of all, which is really cool of you, Khalid did the same thing. And Khalid's supposed to have all these inside ties at Flo. I think Flo just doesn't like me.
Well, they're lost, honestly. So
Thank you, bud. I appreciate that. You're the man, Grant. We wrapping this thing up. I'm going to stop recording, stay on for a second, Grant, but we really appreciate you even coming on and spending some time with us.
my pleasure.